Good morning. Welcome everybody. Sorry we're just a little bit late starting. There's just sort of quite a lot going on and quite a bit to organise. I want to warmly welcome, we've got a large contingent of speakers to public input, and warm welcome to all of you, to the media, to our staff, and of course to all the members of the committee. I've got apologies from Councillor Fletcher for lateness, Councillor Filipaina, who sadly is at a family funeral this morning, Councillor Denise Lee and James Brown, and Councillor Newman for early departure.
20 past 2, Madam Chair.
Okay, that may well be early.
I think it will be.
I'm happy to move those apologies. Is there a seconder? Councillor Collins, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Just before we start the agenda, I would just like to sort of set out a little bit about how we're going to manage and survive this monster agenda. As I said, we've got a lot of input on the really critical issue of smoke-free, the smoke-free policy, and that's fantastic. Just before we go into public input, I just do want to remind councillors that we've got the smoke-free bylaw process that's coming up, and that will be heard through Councillor Cooper's committee, and there will be a large amount of consultation, public input and discussion into that, so we can't conflate the two issues together today. We set the tone, we set the policy, and we listen to the feedback that we get from our public input, but remember we've got then the whole bylaw enforcement process to go through as well. We also have a number of exceedingly large agenda items, so I am going to be chairing this reasonably tightly, and if need be, we'll do the 3 for, 3 against, so that we actually get through the agenda. So, you know, make sure that you make the most of the speaking opportunities and use them wisely. And finally, we do need to finish at 4 because there's a range of meetings that many councillors are involved in that start at 4. So hopefully that will go well today. So declarations of interest, members, anything anyone wishes to raise? As always, please, if it comes up during the meeting, just let us know. Confirmation of minutes, 18th of July. Would someone like to move those? Thank you, Councillor Simpson, and seconded Deputy Mayor Cashmore. I also just want to acknowledge Alf Filipaina for chairing that meeting. He did a fantastic job, and I appreciate that. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Petitions, there are none, but as I said, we have a lot of public input, so again, public input will be keeping it reasonably tightly focused. And our first public input is from Mr. Rex Mangan, who, it isn't. No, he's not, but he's tabled. So we've got the information from Mr. Mangan, which we will be able to read. Sorry, I'm not reading the screen in front of me, I'm reading from my agenda. So we will take into consideration the input and the tabled information from Mr. Mangan, and when we go through our agenda item on the coastal management framework, it'll be really good to use some of the information that Mr. Mangan has given us. So we'll move, I'm happy to move that we receive the documents from Mr. Mangan, seconded by Councillor Wayne Walker. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right, so we now move on to our smoke-free presentations. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 6 people wishing to speak to this, and they are very welcome. I just hope that people just take a little bit of time to think about what might have already been said, doesn't necessarily need to be said again. So first of all, I want to warmly welcome John Loof, Chief Executive from the Cancer Society. Welcome, warm welcome, John. And there's a presentation. So just reminding people about 5 minutes or so presentation, and then time for question.
Great.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone. I'm John Loof. I'm Chief Executive of the Cancer Society Auckland Northland, I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you today. Smoke-free remains hugely important, obviously, to us at the Cancer Society. Every day we work with patients who stay with us while they're receiving their treatment. We're very connected with patients, and this is effectively what this is about. This is about the community. When we see the devastating impact that smoking has on their lives when they are staying with us. Unfortunately, since we were here last year, around 1,700 Aucklanders have died from a smoking-related disease. And I think equally disturbingly, more than 1,000 young people have started smoking at average age of about 14 or 15. As political leaders, you can really do something about that today. Now, it's interesting that smoking rates across the Tasman are about 25% lower than in New Zealand. Now, that's not because Aussie doctors are better than ours. It's because their local and central government politicians have acted quickly and decisively to support the sorts of recommendations that we're making today. And in some cases, they did that over 10 years ago. We've been talking to Council about smoke-free outdoors for the last decade, but if I'm pressed, I have to say that not a lot has changed over that decade. We still see smoking in our town centres, our bus stops, our cafes, on the sideline at the sports fields each weekend. No wonder it's so hard for people to quit and so easy for young people to start when smoking is all around them. One thing that has changed is public support has grown and grown for these sorts of measures. At some point it might have seemed strange that we might have smoke-free indoor spaces, but who would go backwards now? 84% of Aucklanders support your council's plan to make Auckland CBD, outdoor dining and beaches smoke-free in the next year. And today is your opportunity to really make a difference. We don't need to keep talking about it, we need to get on and do it. Last year, Council's review of the smoke-free policy stated that implementation had been ad hoc, fragmented and ineffective. In response, the governing body agreed to strengthen the smoke-free policy and investigate mechanisms such as smoke-free requirements in council contracts as well as a bylaw. Today we're focused on the revised policy and the implementation plan. We're really disappointed that instead of strengthening the policy, it's actually been significantly weakened. Targets have been removed, events have been removed, timeframes have been delayed significantly. Places that were supposed to go smoke-free in 2015 and 2018, like shared spaces, outdoor dining, they're now identified in the policy as future smoke-free spaces with no clear timeframe. In addition, there's no mention in the policy that smoke-free compliance requirements will be included in council contracts. There's also no reference to a smoke-free bylaw, which may complement the policy. Now, alongside the policy is an implementation plan with 102 activities. We're really concerned that this is very much a scattergun approach. And it actually involves a number of steps that we consider a step backwards. You know, cigarette receptacles being placed in public areas, small-scale voluntary community trials, these sorts of things. We believe Council must focus on strategies that are proven to work. And these are a large public awareness campaign, just like Wellington has done. There's been a key success factor overseas. In Auckland, public awareness is unfortunately very low, and we need to turn this around. Implementing smoke-free clauses in council contracts now rather than piecemeal over the next up to 7 years. This will provide regional consistency, it's more efficient, it's more cost-effective, and will embed smoke-free in council systems. Smoke-free outdoor dining. Now, we're especially disappointed about outdoor dining. This was due to go smoke-free in May next year. It now might happen somewhere between 2019 or up to 2025, a delay of 7 years. And it's not even guaranteed. In Australia, many councils did this over a decade ago, and there is strong public and business support for high compliance. So much so that all states in Australia now have smoke-free outdoor dining laws. So Auckland is over a decade behind. Here, outdoor dining licences are renewed annually throughout the year. To address concerns at a level playing field for business, we recommend all outdoor dining become smoke-free from the 1st of September next year. This enables enough time for requirements to go into licences to ensure that all outdoor dining goes smoke-free at the same time, and certainly makes for much easier communications. We've already had smoke-free indoors for over 10 years, and as you know, this works exceedingly well. and has very high compliance and great public acceptance. Before it was introduced, there were concerns from tobacco industry and the Hospitality Association. However, the Ministry of Health's evaluation of smoke-free indoors showed that these concerns were very much unfounded, and all you have to do is listen to the people. Aucklanders, our Chamber of Commerce, our top restaurateurs, all want smoke-free outdoor dining, and they want it now. So what can you do today? Some important details are missing from the current policy. In summary, here are our recommendations that we will leave with you. Amend the revised smoke-free policy to include the following wording. Outdoor dining licences to include a requirement to be smoke-free from the 1st of September 2018. All outdoor settings are smoke-free by 2018, which is as per your 2013 policy. Smoke-free compliance requirements will be included in all new and renewed council contracts, leases, licences, funding agreements and events. Smoke-free areas also apply to the use of e-cigarettes and similar delivery devices. We want you to prioritise and allocate budget to ongoing regional public awareness campaigns with additional focus on the Māori and Pacific communities. And thirdly, a smoke-free bylaw is implemented to support and complement the policy. So in conclusion, please, no more delays. We need stronger smoke-free action and we need it now. Your decisions today can help people to quit. They can support the health of families and communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very sensible, and obviously we've got the recommendations in front of us, and when we come to the discussion, if people have a mind to, we can fold them into our recommendations. So we've probably got time for a couple of questions, and they are questions. Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John and others. So in your view, you're aware of our directions to get this revised policy here, and the words were to strengthen the 2013 smoke-free policy and its intent going forward. In your view, is this when you look at the revised policy and the implementation plan, is it, in your view, a strengthening or a weakening?
It's definitely a weakening. You know, there are a lot of actions there, but they are very fragmented, and many of them we would consider to be quite a step backwards. A lot of low-level community consultation, and we believe the time for that is long past. The public have been very clear in the number of submissions, they've been very clear in what they want, and they want that decisive regional-wide action.
To add to what John said, I just suggest that some of the recommendations that we've put in front of you today would be ways that we see changing the policy from the current position into a strengthened policy would help achieve that.
So just one other question, because others will want to ask. I want to just explore what your view is of having a bylaw in support of a policy. How does that support policy and implementation?
Just to go back, I think, to where this process came from. So if we look at the review of the smoke-free policy that came up last year, it showed that the current policy is being ad hoc in its implementation. You know, people don't know about it. It's been fragmented and ineffective. So there were some real founding reasons why this process came about. And as a result of that process, the Committee of the Whole last year did make a really great decision to strengthen the policy. Now, when we looked at what those strengthening things were and what was agreed to last year, it was a range of mechanisms. So from strengthening the policy and key mechanisms that are before you today, such as putting this in licences and leases and other mechanisms such as that. These were fundamental, but also if we look at what was done and agreed to last year, if we look overseas, these mechanisms such as licences and leases and really effective communication strategies also sit alongside a smoke-free bylaw, and they operate in different settings and in different ways, so both do interact and complement each other.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your concise and well thought through presentation. My question's around the amendments, particularly D that you've got up there, talking about the restriction of the e-cigarettes and other similar devices. Could you just explain to me why you've included that?
It's our view, it's our view that it'd be perceived by the public to be a bit ambiguous and a bit inconsistent if we had people, for example, in an outdoor dining area using an e-cigarette device when people aren't allowed to smoke in that area. We think that would create some public confusion, and we think, you know, one of the problems we're trying to solve is regional-wide consistency, and you know, I think that sort of speaks to that. You know, we don't want to go back to the days, sorry, we'd never like to see the use of an e-cigarette in a bus or a cinema, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I think the same applies, same context, to an outdoor dining area.
Right, thank you.
Good question. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. In reading the report on item 14 today, which we'll consider on this item, one of the points that are raised is feedback from local boards, and I just quote one bullet point under para 41, concerned the lack of regional resourcing for policy implementation bracket. Many noted that the costs associated with implementing the first phase of the policy put significant strain on local board budgets, close bracket. You might not have seen that. But can I take it from your presentation today that what you are recommending would be that actually concurrent to a policy as part of a successful implementation, that the governing body vote to appropriate new regional funding to ensure that it can properly fund the signage and advertising at a local level to ensure that there is proper awareness of the smoke-free policy in the event that it were to be adopted?
I think, in essence, we agree with that. So one of the key recommendations that we're making today is with putting this in all of the council contracts. Now, one of the reasons for that is currently some local boards are doing this and some others aren't. And so this would provide efficiency and consistency across the region with regards to that. We are also recommending that budget is allocated centrally for regional communications, because we believe that this is the most effective way to roll smoke-free out across Auckland, backed by what local boards may do in addition to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And last question, Member Blair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is around impacts on Māori, and I see you've hapai te hauora here. How will the strengthening of this policy impact on Māori?
The policy is designed to support everyone who wants to quit. If you could describe it as, you know, making smoking less convenient. You know, back in the day, smoking was incredibly convenient. You could smoke anywhere you wanted to. Gradually, by creating more spaces where people aren't allowed to smoke, it makes it less convenient, and it really supports, well, two things. It supports people who are trying to quit, and it makes it less visible to youngsters who might be tempted to be the smokers of the future. Obviously, in any context, and we're all aware of the statistics that the Māori smoking rates in Auckland are still very, very high, and anything we can do to target and support anyone wanting to quit, in particular Māori and people with high smoking rates, we think that's extremely important in all of this. And the fact that it applies to, you know, a range of settings, sports fields, all of these things, sports clubs, you know, that's, again, we think will be very beneficial.
Okay, thank you very much. Hugely appreciate the submission and the information and the answers to the questions. So what we're going to do, I neglected to say it at the beginning, and I do apologise, we'll move business so that we'll deal with the smoke-free issue immediately after public input, so that you don't have to sit through the huge agenda to wait to see what we do. So thank you again.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Next up, we have David Sinclair, well known to us, and Hayley Pritchard, Public Health. Warm welcome to both of you.
Right.
Sorry,
Good morning,
David,
councillors.
you're joined by someone else.
Yes, with Hayley Pritchard and Dee Mann, who's the manager of our health improvement team, which is runs our smoke-free program. I'm David Sinclair. I'm one of the medical officers of health with the Public Health Service in Auckland. We have a number of roles in this, as one of which is as the Smokefree regulatory agency for the Auckland region, and also actively involved in smoke-free promotion. As you're well aware, smoking is the leading cause of avoidable mortality in New Zealand and costing over $1.9 billion annually, which doesn't include other indirect costs of smoking. 3 DHBs are working actively with a number of other agencies to achieve the national health target for better help for smokers to quit, alongside the cessation agencies such as ProCare, the Fauna and Counties Manukau District Health Board. We led the development of the Smoke-Free Auckland Tupeka Kore Tamaki Makaro strategy last year, which the Council was actively involved with. The strategy has a bold goal which includes by 2025 that communal public places are smoke-free, and Auckland Council plays an important part and unique role in achieving this, which none of our other partners can replicate. It's an important role for Council here. Last August, we spoke at the Regional Strategy and Policy Committee meeting, and we left satisfied that in the near future Auckland would be leading the way towards a smoke-free 2025. And we appreciated the Council's commitment to revise and strengthen the smoke-free policy, which is the topic for today, and commence the statutory process for investigating the smoke-free bylaw and develop an action plan to target those most in need, including Māori, Pacific and vulnerable communities. In the context of the Council directed the policy to be strengthened last August, we have concerns very much reflecting what the Cancer Society have just presented, that in some areas the revised 2017-25 policy has been weakened rather than strengthened. I'll pass over to Hayley.
Good morning. We will try to keep this short as recommended by the chairperson because many of our messages are similar to the Cancer Society. However, we want to balance and emphasise that these are really important messages that need to be said. So in terms of the smoke-free policy, like David just mentioned, we also believe that the policy has been weakened rather than strengthened. If you can have a look at the slide up there, we've mapped out at the top the 2013 policy and down the bottom the 2018 to 2025 policy in terms of settings. So as you'll see on the top, in the old policy, all settings were going to be smoke-free by 2018. However, now we've got the ones from 2013 still in place. The settings from 2015 have now been pushed out to 2019 to 2025, as have the 2018 settings. So there's been quite a dramatic change in the commitment about when these things are going to happen, and we find that concerning. Smoke-free 2025 is now less than 8 years away, so time is a precious factor in this discussion today. However, if these the timeframes are strengthened, as we will be recommending later in this presentation, we will be happy to support the implementation of the policy. In terms of the implementation plan, we're happy to see the inclusion of clauses in commercial agreements as we recommended last year. However, we would like to see this strengthened by a consistent approach to all types of commercial agreements, which includes compliance clauses. So in the implementation plan, we find that this is fragmented, that they're all happening in different times. So we want to see it all happening together and all to have a compliance clause, so there is an extra strength and benefit to it. We also share the Cancer Society's disappointment that there were no clauses included for outdoor dining, because we find that is to be a really important setting. We appreciate that Council has recognised the importance of their role in the smoke-free sector and has been dedicated to creating smoke-free environments in the settings that we have recommended along the years. This is very evident in the plan, where there's 102 actions. However, as Public Health Service contracted to deliver health promotion projects, we're concerned that there's 51 projects set for the next 12 months, and there's also a further 51, so there's 102 actions in total. These are set out with no committed funding. So we're concerned that the number of projects would dilute Council's effort, and the activities that are already happening through other organisations, regardless of their contracts, are included in the plan as well. So what we would be recommending is that Council focuses on the actions where they have a unique role to play, and that have the greatest impact and are cost effective, like the principle and the policy dictates. So in terms of the key asks, we also have the same key asks as the Cancer Society. So these are things that we've discussed thoroughly since we received the plan on Thursday. So long nights, weekends have been involved in these discussions, and this is a position that we bring to you today. So just to repeat what they are, we would like to see outdoor dining licences included and to make this occur from the 1st of September next year. We want to make sure that all of those outdoor settings that were in the original plan in 2013 are made smoke-free by 2018, like in the original plan. We don't want any further delays on that. We would like a compliance factor put into the lease requirements for all settings included in that. And we also agree that we would like e-cigarettes included in this to reflect the Ministry's position. We would like Council to prioritise and allocate budget to implement this plan, so particularly in terms of a communications strategy, and we'd like to see a strong Māori and Pacific focus in this communications plan. And we are also supportive of the development of a bylaw. We acknowledge that that is being presented at the Regulatory Committee, but we just want to put that in there today. So the last thing that I want to speak to you about today is a little prop that I've brought here. So what I have with me is a Memorandum of Understanding which was signed in May 2003. So this was signed by the then 4 mayors of the 4 Auckland cities and also the 2 Auckland regions. It was also signed by the 3 CEOs of the DHBs. This was a commitment that was 14 years ago now, where we were all committing to the collaborative promotion of smoke-free environments for our children and communities. And this was quite pertinent to me, that this is a discussion that has been happening for a long time. We're all committed to it, and that's great. We love being committed to achieving this. However, we want to start seeing the actions for it. We want to see Auckland pave our way towards Smoke-Free 2025, and we want to achieve that collaborative promotion of smoke-free environments for children in our communities. Thank you.
Awesome. Right, again, any questions? Well, and just, councillors, just be aware, we're just going to try and save the recommendations, so when we come to our recommendation discussion, if members are of a mind to, we can lift some of those recommendations and add them into what we're doing here. Questions? No, pretty clear as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for the work you do. As I say, David in particular is very well known to us and has done sterling work with local government over a long time. Thank you. So next we've got Mrs. Tanya Chipper on behalf of the community.
2025 smoke-free.
Sorry, Tanya, it's probably a lot more than that. It's just I've got here on behalf of the community, so that's a very worthy title.
Yeah.
Warm welcome.
Thank you.
Just automatically.
Thank you.
Welcome, Councillor Fletcher.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Tanya Skipper. I'm from the Linfield area, or the Puketapapa area. I'm married to John, and we have 2 boys, Alexander, aged 23, and Yanni, aged 19. I'm proud to say I am of Croatian descent, and I'm heavily involved in the Dalmatian Cultural Society here in Auckland, the last 5 years as treasurer. Smoke-free New Zealand is hugely important to me because my mum passed away of oral cancer at just 68 years young. Far too young, in my words. I feel I have been robbed of a mother, a grandmother, and a mother-in-law. She would have loved to see our son graduate last year. She would have been so very proud. She's missed out on so many life events. To watch my mum, over a period of 1 year, die from this awful disease was horrific. To watch her pain Her disfigurement of her face, her not eating, was heartbreaking and traumatic to say the least. My sisters and I looked after her at home, and together we worked with West Auckland Hospice and their amazing nurses to make her as comfortable as possible. She wanted to die in her own home, surrounded by her family, but unfortunately, her pain was so bad that she passed away at hospice. As a council, what are you doing to make outdoor dining and other places smoke-free? Why are you stalling? Last weekend, John and I enjoyed a long weekend in Australia. Such a pleasure to eat outside in a restaurant without cigarette smoke interfering with our dining experience. Why are we behind Australia? Yeah. My family and I and our community want smoke-free now. We want action. Do something positive. Make a difference. Make outdoor dining and other places smoke-free now. Thank you for listening and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mrs. Skipper? If not, just a huge acknowledgement for you being here to
Thank you.
put the face of, you know, what we're actually talking about to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay and listen to the discussion. Our next presenter is Mrs. Zoe Hawke, General Manager of National Tobacco Control Advocacy Services. Welcome, and I do apologise if I don't have everyone's names who are going to be presenting.
That's okay.
So if you want to.
Yes, this is Rebecca, and I've invited her to speak with me, and you'll find out why soon. So I'm from Hāpai Te Hauora, and we do have the National Tobacco Control Advocacy Service. And I think about a year ago I sat here presenting on your policy of the time around Smokefree 2025, and I remember clearly saying that actually it was a really good policy. It's just the implementation of it that was lacking. When I look at the revised policy, I have to say I am disappointed because it doesn't seem as robust as the original one. We're not so happy with it, and we would like to almost see reverse of the policy back to the old one and a stronger implementation plan aligned with the old policy. I will talk to that a bit more. Is it this one? So the reason we are disappointed is because you've heard it all before. The other presenters have said it really, and Councillor Penny, I'm mindful of you saying not to repeat the kōrero too much, but basically Māori and Pacific, they're not going to reach 2025. If we carry on like we are, actually, they'll hit it in 2065. So unless we be bold and call for consistency and have consistency implemented, we're not going to get there, sadly. And we have to remember too that actually Māori didn't have tobacco as part of our culture prior to colonisation. So actually this is just returning to a state that we were once, and we need your support to do that. And we're not, Hāpai aren't supportive of those voluntary kind of processes because so far it hasn't worked for us. This is just a graph on where we're at in regards to Māori and Pacific smoking, where we need to be, and where we currently are. And as you can see, it's not looking good for us. And the Southern Initiative is the area that we're most concerned about. So it's also for us at Hāpai around our whenua. Tobacco butts are one of the largest items of rubbish on our streets, on our beaches, on our roads. And actually, if we're going to truly make a difference in regards to the environment, we need to cut that out as well. So this is a win-win sort of situation. Less smoking around, less butts around, better for our environment. That's my boy, by the way, Ngātai. And you may notice the hawk in the name. I am married to a hawk. I should have said that earlier. However, dare I say it, I am actually Ngāti Pawa. So interesting household we have. Ngāti Pātua and Ngāti Pawa kids. So it is the right thing to do, because tobacco is hurting Māori and Pacific greatly. It's harming the environment. If we were all together on this, we would see great change. And smoke-free areas, if we see it less, because there's a whole lot of role modelling going on for our whānau, our children, if we see it less, then it will be denormalised. So just like the Cancer Society and AFS, we want some new wording in the policy to show some more teeth, to return it back to its original state, which we were quite happy with. But we do, and it's really difficult just agreeing with your colleagues when you respect them so much, but we don't support e-cigs in the current policy. And there's a few reasons for that, and this is why I have brought Rebecca. The reason for that is sometimes when you tell communities you can't do this, you can't do that, and you're bad for doing this and bad for doing that, that's kind of the message with smoke-free environments in some ways. But don't give them the support to shift off smoking. It can have a little bit of a counter effect. And actually, we're seeing more and more vaping, or e-cigarettes, is the chosen method for Māori and Pacific to quit smoking. And these are the hardcore smokers that have tried lots and lots of things, but it hasn't worked. And e-cigs for them have helped them to make that transition. So we're talking about quitting and denormalising, but smoke-free environments alone won't do that unless we give them the support that they need to transition. This is just like gum and lozenges. It's a tool that's innovative, it's new technology, it is less harmful, it is not going to make people die from cancer, it's not harmful. So we would like to see that the smoke-free policy that you currently have continue, the revised one, without e-cigarettes. We think that's a great move, and we're happy with at least that part of it. Kia ora, and I'm going to hand it to Rebecca just quickly, because Rebecca runs a community-driven initiative in GI and out south now around e-cigarettes, and what it's doing for our Māori and Pacific we cannot ignore.
Kia ora koutou. Yes, I run a program called Vape to Save, and predominantly most of the people that are walking through my door in my groups are Māori and Pacific. I have a high quit rate, and it's heading in the 80 to 90% quit rate, and that's using e-cigarettes. This technology has changed my whole way of thinking. I've been working in stop smoking services for 10 years plus, trained the workforce for Ministry of Health, and I decided I'm going to give this a trial because I need to see what it does. It made people switch from smoking combustible smoke, from tobacco, and switching to vaping in a week. And the amount of money that they were saving, and they were reducing their debt, they are paying their bills, they're putting food on their table, and their children were getting stuff that they needed for school was amazing. Now, you know, if you were to put e-cigarettes in with the smoke-free policy, the message that you're giving across to people is that vaping is as bad as tobacco, and it isn't. It is the combustible smoke that's doing damage. E-cigarettes is vapor, not smoking. It's not combustible smoke. And you've got to really understand that. You know, New Zealand is actually leading here when it comes to Australia. And our government has been so progressive that, you know, to have Auckland City being as progressive as possible and in supporting e-cigarettes in that, then, you know, I think this is a new environment. We have tried and tried and tried many times to help people to stop smoking with all our traditional methods we have currently in this country. E-cigarettes is going to make a huge impact for Māori and Pacific. I see that myself with the groups that I am conducting. And, you know, it would be good if the Auckland City could support it.
And my final comment, better for the environment too, because if you have e-cigarettes, guess what? No smoke butts.
No.
Kia ora. That's our kōrero. Open to any questions. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. I've got Councillor Cooper and Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you for your presentation. I just have two questions, and they're not coming from any place of my view. Just one is around, we know with tougher drink driving laws, people bought the alcohol and took it home. Do you think, is any thought done about the fact that, okay, if I can't smoke when I'm at the pub or out at the door, you know, at a restaurant, well, I'm just not going to go out, I'll just stay home and do it. Has there been any thinking or surveys around that it might drive that behaviour?
I think, no, we don't believe it will, and there's a reason for that, and that is it sends a clear message to our communities that it's just not something acceptable anymore. And from our experience, Smoke-Free Marae is the same concept, and it does contribute to people thinking about their smoking behaviour and what it's doing for their children. So it supports, yeah.
Thank you. And just the other question, Madam Chair. E-cigarettes, I kind of, you know, hear what you're saying, and there's been some, I don't know if you know about this research in England done with several hospitals or universities talking about, they said that e-cigarettes are really good for adults getting off cigarettes, but it was really bad for young people. They started on the vapor and then went to cigarettes. Have you heard
so
about that research?
The gateway, the gateway impact is actually, there's no credible research actually to show that. In fact, the opposite is happening. It depends on what research you actually read, but there's counter arguments for that too, and counter research as well. And my argument goes back to, well, if traditional tobacco is available everywhere and seen everywhere, actually that may encourage young people to smoke. And wouldn't you rather have a less harmful product out there and remove the traditional tobacco that's killing us and hooking our children?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, ladies, for your presentation. My question is,
Kia ora.
sorry, and good to see you again. It was good to see you last year. Good to hear your presentation again today. My question is one to you of the dilemma that some of us may be facing. For myself, I don't believe the recommendations that are being put to councillors today are strong enough. So rather than seeing something crafted on the hoof, I wonder whether, from my perspective, it might be better to send it back to officers for some further massaging and some further work on the implementation of it and the monitoring. Are groups such as your own that are working with vulnerable communities, are you willing to keep working with council officers to come up with a more workable
absolutely.
regime?
We've got a really good relationship with the policy team here, actually, and we would like to continue working with them. And that's right, we do work with those vulnerable communities. So our discussion here today is about the realities of those communities. And if we can support the council to understand that more, absolutely.
Thank you.
We're kind of working on recommendations along that line, Councillor Clove.
Thank you. Could you just give us the example if someone was smoking a pack a day, so that's 7 times whatever it is, as compared to what the cost of e-cigarettes would be for a week, and therefore what is the extra money people are putting on their table?
Yes, so e-cigarettes, that's the other benefit too, is that they are far cheaper than traditional tobacco. And with tax increases and the media attention on how that's impacting on our most vulnerable communities, e-cigs is another solution to that particular problem because they still have nicotine in, they're just not tobacco, less harmful and also cheaper. And the government is supporting that move too. So they are going to be making e-juice more available because they see the benefits on all those particular points.
I think also with my groups, they're spending $80 to $120 a week on tobacco every week. When they switch over to an e-cigarette, to get a 30ml bottle with nicotine, e-juice, we call it, it's a maximum of $40, and that 30ml lasts 4 weeks. So it's only $40 per month. So you can, just listening to that, it shows you the amount of money that these families are saving.
About $90 a week, sort of thing.
Pretty much.
To bring us back to why we're here, strengthening the policy in regards to smoke-free outdoor areas is absolutely one that we want to support because we do see it was weakened, but if we could keep e-cigs out of the policy, that would be great because it's the combo of strategies that's going to get Māori there and Pacific there. We can't just rely on one strategy. We haven't moved. Our stats aren't moving. We have to do something different, and this supports Māori and Pacific in so many ways.
Kia ora. And final question, Member Blair.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora kōrua. I'm just thinking a bit further down the line in implementation, if e-cigarettes was included within a policy, how you would, if there's a group of people smoking cigarettes plus e-cigarettes on a beach, for example, how you would kind of manage that process. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, absolutely. See, what's happened, the first generation of e-cigs did look absolutely like a cigarette, and that's probably where this kind of call it or thinking around that looks like smoking has come from. The new ones, the new more modern mods, is that what they're called? Yep. Mods actually do not look anything like a cigarette. So I think there's some clear ways we can differentiate. And I think, again, if we continue to reduce the supply of traditional tobacco, which is something the government's looking at currently at the moment too, then the confusion will be less too. So this is just prepping for the future. We are not going to have tobacco around like we used to. So what are we going to do to support those people that are hooked on a product that was designed in the first place to hook them?
And I also think, creating a campaign of vaping etiquette. It already happens with vapors now, how they don't try and blow big obnoxious clouds in front of people's faces. So that could be something that is further down the line of creating these campaigns.
Now my colleagues really didn't want this to be an e-cig kind of takeover kōrero, so I'm conscious that I want to respect them because this is about the smoke-free outdoor area policy and wanting to strengthen it. So thank you for listening to us, and I hope you do consider what we have had to say.
Sorry, and Rebecca, that was really useful because that's part of what this is about. So we've had, just to remind people, in a democracy, a paper arrives, we then debate it, we take in extra information and we work out where we need to go with this. And where we might be going with this is that we need a lot more discussion and a lot more joined up debate. The how-to is in the bylaw side of things, but it seems like we've got a lot more discussion.
And just lastly, one comment, the policy team came up with excluding the e-cigs in the policy on their own, and we actually didn't advocate it aggressively to them, and the reason they've done that is because of all the research available and also where the government's moving to. Kia ora.
Okay. Kia ora. Thank you both.
Kia ora.
We've got a couple more presentations, and I'd like to warmly welcome Edward, Stephanie, Winnie Leitu from Pacific Smoke-Free Services. Warm welcome.
Manuel lava le tai au, talofa lava, bula vanaka. Kia ora nā malo e lelei, whakalofa lahi atu, and kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Edward Cowley, and my colleagues here are Stephanie Eric. She's a long-time tobacco control advocate for Pacific. Winnie Matanoa, she's from the Whono, and she is a stop smoking specialist, and Leitu Tufunga from the Cancer Society. So together, the four of us, we are part of the Pacific Smokefree Network. And the Pacific Smokefree Network was established in 2015. We have 160 active members from across 60 different organisations. Mainly they work in Pacific Health, and across the different Pacific sectors. And I guess our role is, how we see ourselves is that we can sort of be a voice for Pacific tobacco control and have a collective and a collaborative voice that addresses issues for Pacific smoking rates, because we are right in there and amongst it. So that's who we are collectively. Individually, I sit here as an individual whose father died as a direct result from smoking at 63, having smoked for 50 years. He left behind 8 children and 33 grandchildren. Of those 8 children, I was a smoker. I had 5 siblings that were smokers, so we were 6 adult smokers. When my father died, all 6 of us decided that we would stop smoking collectively. Today, we have 50 grandchildren, and my mother has 50 grandchildren, and none of us as adults smoke, and none of our children smoke, and none of our children's children smoke. So we did that because that happened to our family. What we are here asking you to do is sort of trying to make some of those decisions that other families, Pacific families in our communities, can't make or won't make because they just don't have the knowledge, capacity, or someone in their family that's passed away to make those decisions for them. So we absolutely applaud, and we were actually stoked that the councils had a goal of smoke-free by 2025, and that there was a Southern initiative of smoking rates to be less than 3%. Although we now notice that there is no mention of these targets in the current policy. So it would be great if these were both back in policy and as a measure in the implementation plan. So the majority of Pacific population live right here in Auckland. The negative impact of smoking on Pacific families and communities is massive. So we would really like to see a shift in culture in Auckland so that smoking is not normal to our people anymore. For some communities, smoking is completely not normal at all. For our community, it's still really normal. So it would be great if you could help support Pacific people make smoking not normal anymore.
Thanks, Edward. So this graph shows that basically we know who was smoking, we know where they're smoking, and we actually know what to do. We're really sad that these rates that we see in front of us are far away from the national target, far away from the local target of 3%, and in fact nowhere near the target that we also have in the Pacific Islands, because the Pacific Islands want to be smoke-free by 2025 as well. And we know that at Auckland we have such a high transient community with our Pacific people going back and forth to the Pacific. Pacific are a young population, we're relatively highly fertile, and we know that by 2060 this is going to be a brown Auckland. So we need to be thinking about how we invest in our children today. We know that there is complex needs in these communities, and we need to make sure that we finish this job around getting rid of smoking in our communities now, so we can get on to the other problems that are, unfortunately, plaguing our communities. So we're just here to say we need bold, courageous decisions for positive, strong change. We need Auckland policies to focus on evidence-based strategies, prioritise work in areas that we all know, it's not a mystery, that we have high needs in Papakura, Manurewa, Otahu, Mangere, Otara Papataui. These local board areas have complex needs, and we really need to fix the tobacco issue there. There will be effective gains by putting smoke-free requirements in your contracts and in a bylaw as supported by the Southern Initiative communities. So with this, if we were to break that graph down around Pacific peoples and segregate the information, we know that smoking rates are very high amongst Cook Island female. We know that after that it's Tongan males. We know the complexities and nuances around what is happening in our communities. And this group here are more than happy to help. I'm in the minimising gambling sector now, but I'm here because I'm so passionate about getting rid of this. We've had huge changes in the tobacco control environment over the last year. There have been many advocacy groups and policy groups and important health promotion groups who've lost funding. So I'm here on a voluntary basis, taking time out from my job with Hapai. Thank you, Hapai, for talking. To just be here, to lend my voice to this such important kaupapa here. So what is needed as well as tailored mass media for our Pacific communities, for Māori communities, for all communities that are represented on that graph. And I think if we were to break that down to ensure that we were saturating our communities in Auckland with clear, consistent messaging. That's something that we need to do, and we have the right messengers that are willing to support this as well. The evidence is clear, public support is strong, stop smoking services are up and running, the Pacific Smoke-Free Network are here to support, and other organisations who are represented here and taking the time to come and talk. And I think that all that is needed now is a very strong bylaw to act as the backbone to ensure action is timely, evaluated and coordinated. So I'm encouraged by your openness to listen to us and to our kōrero. So whakawela he koe ni e tau mena e tau kupahaku, kia ora. Kia ora.
And I'm here as a smoking cessation practitioner who works in the community. And I've worked in the South Auckland and West Auckland community for several years. And I just thank you for the opportunity to be able to just come and just share some of the stories that I've encountered as a practitioner in the communities. But I also believe that your smoke-free policy could provide so much support in helping people quit. Now, as a practitioner in South Auckland, I worked with a mother who was trying to give up smoking. She'd given up smoking for 2 weeks. However, on her way to school with her child, she saw cigarette butts on the road. And that just caused her to just really want to actually pick up a cigarette off the road and smoke it again. Now, she was really strong in her goals to become smoke-free. However, the environment around her didn't allow her to do so. And seeing her child actually stopped her from picking up that cigarette and putting it in her mouth. Now, these are actually true stories, and stories that people haven't heard. On another occasion, I'm working with a woman who is smoke-free for a month. She is out celebrating with her husband in outdoor dining. What happens? She sees people smoking in the outdoor area. And so, again, relapse. She's in her mind, she wants to have a cigarette. Pops up the road to the local supermarket, buys a packet of cigarettes, decides to start smoking again, then has to re-enroll into the Stop Smoking program. And I guess from my point of view is that I'm really for well-being and for the next generation, our young ones, our families, our children. And in order to do so, I really think that the smoke-free policy needs to be strengthened. Now, I'm not saying that, as a stop smoking practitioner, there are probably more sad stories or bad stories or unsuccessful stories than there are good stories. So I just feel that we just need to continue to work strong into making it a healthier environment outside for our children, our next generation.
So this is the call to action. So last year in 2016, the council, you reviewed the policy and you decided on these certain things that you would investigate strengthening the smoke-free policy, looking at smoke-free requirements in council contracts, investigate in a smoke-free bylaw and reduce tobacco-related inequalities with a focus for Māori and Pacific. So, like Zoe said, I was very, very disappointed. This was a watered-down approach of this policy, and with the timeframes were not included, the TSI goal of reaching 3% was not included as well. So we're recommending that that goes in the policy as well as the implementation plan. You need to measure how well you are doing. We also need to see consistency within this implementation plan, as well as a focus on getting a few things right, just a few things right, not 102 activities. That will not make the biggest impact for Māori and Pacific. So, like Cancer Society, ARFS, Hapai, we have the same recommendations as well. So, we want to walk away knowing that Council has taken the strongest approach. These are the strongest approaches. And that your officers also action these strong recommendations as well. I just want to highlight prioritising and allocating budget, essential for, again, what was repeated ongoing awareness, and backed up by a smoke-free policy. And like Cancer Society has mentioned, that is the norm for Australia. We should be shifting right along with our Aussie cousins. So we look forward to seeing those recommendations put into action.
So finally, we thank you for your time today, and we are thankful that the Council is committed to strengthening its smoke-free policy. As the policy stands now, it's a fact that Pacific people will not make the 2025 goal, nor will Pacific people reach the TSI targets that sit at less than 3%. The most of the Pacific people live right here in Auckland, so you've got a great job in being able to show support for our Pacific people here. We absolutely need effective action now, and we humbly request that you adopt our recommendations without delay. Thank you for your time. Whawhitai lava, kia manuia, malo au pito.
So I'm sure there'll be a couple of questions. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you.
Councillor Quacks.
Thank you. Just your views on the e-cigarette would be really helpful.
From a practitioner point of view, working with Māori and Pacific most vulnerable groups is, in my groups, in my group-based therapy, I found that e-cigs have helped increase the number of clients or people who are smoking to become smoke-free. Okay. And that's just from my experience from working with Māori and Pacific.
Thank you. Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, thank you. Is it Edward?
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful jacket, Edward.
Thank you.
Edward's known for stunning outfits.
Yes, he is.
I think a lot of councillors were inspired by your story. And it did raise the question for me, how much of the cessation of smoking is a personal responsibility, an individual responsibility, because we can put all the bylaws in place, we can have, unless we ban tobacco, but to what extent is it your story inspirational? Can you pass that on to the rest of your community, that it is eventually a personal responsibility that you've got to make for your financial position, for your good health, that you should stop smoking?
Well, yeah, absolutely. But for a lot of our people, they've grown up in an environment where smoking is the norm. So, they see people they love, their mum, their dad, their auntie, their uncle. They start smoking from they see them smoking when they're very young. So in terms of sort of what's normal, and they're seeing people they love smoking, so how can that be bad for me? And by the time they've made the decision in terms of wanting to stop, they're completely addicted. So how do we get off the addiction? And then so they can access services, absolutely. But if the environment is not supporting them to access those services or to change the way they behave or think, then chances are their children are going to go through the same pattern. So for some people and for some communities, that's not an issue at all. From Pacific people, it is still an issue. So whilst we sort of, I work with churches, we work in communities, and we tell our story constantly, but there are still people that we don't get to. And unfortunately, that's the majority of the people.
Thank you, Councillor Quacks. Councillor Clow.
I was going to ask the same question as Councillor Cooper, so therefore I'll just expand a little bit. So what is your position on e-cigarettes and vaping?
Oh, sorry. I've seen the benefit of vaping and what it does, how it's helped Pacific people or other people as well. I do see that actually, and sometimes I'm sort of walking around and I see people using e-cigarettes and I see that great big wad of smoke and I've got to do a double take because I'm not sure if they are smoking or if they're using an e-cigarette. In terms of, it being a device to help Pacific people get off the tobacco, it's working for our populations. In terms of it sort of being something that I see young people observing adults using e-cigarettes, will they confuse it for smoking? Will they think that what that person is doing is smoking? I have no idea because it's been a very long time since I was a child. But I do think, so who knows, I'd like to think that it works for my communities from what I've seen, but in terms of perception and public perception and how people view it and how young people view it, completely different.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Newman, I just note there's quite a few councillors are starting to bring recommendations, so perhaps just let's take a little breath. Let's just breathe through this, wait till we get to the item and focus on our presenters. So I'd like to deal with the issue of recommendations and process once we've finished hearing from our community, which is utterly enlightening and hugely useful. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Taking a big smoke-free breath. One of the speakers said that what is needed now is a bylaw. If a policy and a bylaw were to be implemented or to be adopted by this governing body, the council, is it your view that the council, having adopted that policy and a bylaw, needs to regionally resource those things to ensure that it can be implemented at a local level?
So our position around a bylaw definitely complements all of the putting smoke-free requirements in licence and licences. As well as if you look at, like Cancer Society has mentioned, the evidence which Australia has currently put in place, it complements all of the other requirements. So what we want to see is a shift of culture. For Pacific peoples, we want to see that shift of culture, as well as Māori. We looked at those stats, that's what we need to do. That is the bold action that will take us across. Are you able to also refrain? There was a second part of your question that you had asked.
So the crux of my inquiry is, do you think if we adopt a policy, that we need to appropriate the funding to ensure that we've got a regional resourcing in place?
Yes.
For that?
And I think that is, that would come out of an implementation plan or an action plan, which would be decided by the councillors and directed through to your policy team or officers.
Regional funding for that implementation plan. Okay, thank you.
That's exactly it. And finally, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry, no, and Councillor Stewart. Did we put Stewart instead of Simpson instead of Stewart? It's both? Right. Councillor Simpson, then Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, we know what an ordinary cigarette is and we know what an e-cigarette is. Have you any comments on shishas? Do you know what they are?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Any comments on those?
Shishas are usually provided in a certain vicinity. It is similar to an e-cigarette, possibly. But it's
far more harmful than cigarettes and e-cigarettes. It's like smoking 10 cigarettes at one time. I'd encourage that we make sure that that's included in the smoke-free policy.
That was, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Sheesh.
But it tastes nice, so it hooks people in.
Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Okay, it's sort of following on from some of the questions that have already been asked, but the Ministry of Health at this time doesn't believe that they've got enough evidence to recommend e-cigarettes confidently. So I think, I'm just thinking before we decide on something, I think I'd like to, hear from you. I think, what do you think? Do you think we should get a little bit more evidence and find out a little bit more about the e-cigarettes, because they're actually thinking that they could be harmful. They're not completely feeling as if they're safe.
Nothing's completely safe ever. I know that e-cigarettes are 95% more safer than cigarettes, and I think that given what we've heard from practitioners and people on the ground, and we've heard in previous oral submissions that e-cigarettes are working for Māori and Pacific people who have tried everything else, Champix, what are the other things, patches, lozenges and gums. It is safe for us to move forward with e-cigarettes, and we are needing some change, a disruption almost, to ensure that we get across the line. So I personally support e-cigarettes as a way of stop smoking, but I also don't support it being sort of all over the show. I wouldn't like to go to the library and see clouds of vape, personally, but I do want to see e-cigarettes being accessible everywhere for smokers to be able to quit. That's my view.
No, that's interesting to hear about the libraries, and it's sort of a little bit like outdoor dining.
I know just the other weekend I was somewhere and there were 2 people vaping, and it was sort of vaping and annoying a lot of people. So
I think
I'm
Rebecca
pleased to
made
hear
a
you say
beautiful
that.
recommendation for just some etiquette, and I think that if we had some clear, concise etiquette around vaping, then that will just help with moving us forward.
And the Ministry of Health has currently set up a technical advisory group in and around e-cigarettes and sort of a position statement moving forward. But I was at an event last week in Parliament, and the Associate Minister of Health, the Honourable Nikki Wagner, she did say she thinks vaping is the way to go.
And you also might want to have just advise you as councillors to also take the time out to see what the other councils around New Zealand are currently positioned themselves in. There has been another council down the line that has included e-cigarettes within their policy. So, like you said, you would need to look at that research, but also have a look at the current trends with other councils as well.
Okay. We do just need to bring this to a close because we've still got a couple of presenters. We've been going for an hour now. Councillor Hills.
I probably could wait for my speaking turn, but probably more of a do you agree? Do you agree that it would be extremely difficult for not only council officers, but also maybe bar managers or people trying to sort this problem out if people are smoking e-cigarettes and outdoor dining, to identify and manage and restrict what's going on with puffs of smoke going on everywhere? Do you perceive that that's an issue? Or it will be difficult to manage?
It may cause some issues around confusion with public, so that's why I think your decision today is very important in terms of putting it a requirement in your leases and licences comes with a package which I think Cancer Society would be more than happy to support policy around how that is implemented. Talking through what the requirements is, as well as the staff. But it may raise some issues around confusion.
Okay. And that's, we don't have to solve all of those today. So, Councillor Collins, last question to you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I'm interested in this, but there's a lot of broad talk about how we approach this. Yet some of the findings that all of you have come back with, all the presenters and yourselves, is the impact on vulnerable communities, Māori and Pacific. I'm wondering then if, when looking at implementation, looking at promotional activity to bring down levels of smoking, if there should be a targeted approach, what your thoughts are around a targeted approach for the TSI areas and for Māori Pacific vulnerable communities.
Absolutely, a targeted and prioritised approach. We need to start in the hardest area first. And I think that we know the information, we know the communities, so we know how to talk to our own communities. So it's about getting us involved in what we said earlier. We're here to help. And we want to participate in a significant way, and the public want to participate and support as well. So, Fessel, any time, you have our mobile numbers, so please call us.
And just to add to that, in terms of the implementation plan, in terms of what you've just asked, focus on Māori Pacific, I didn't actually get a clear direction or a dedicated communication or engagement plan, which clearly outlines step by step how they would approach this. So, just in layman terms, what I would like to see in that implementation plan is, for my people out south, is that there is a clear indication of a communications plan and a community engagement plan outlining that there will be mass media done in certain ways. Good comms and engagement is key, which we've learnt from Melbourne around how they've implemented that, as well as fine-tuning that with Māori and Pacific communities. So that's what I want to see, which I did not see in this implementation plan. It was filtered throughout different stages.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Right, thank you. Thank you to all of you for the presentation and for the kind of wider context that you've set. And Edward, thank you for that really personal sharing. Thank you.
Vote of thanks, Chair.
Oh, we're going to do them as a group,
all
councillor.
together. I was out there more, are they?
Yep, we are. Well, actually, no, why don't we, because our next, no, we'll do them all together. Our next presentation, and the final one on Smokefree, is Nadine, Regional Manager for Hospitality New Zealand.
Thank you.
Hi. I've actually got some handouts that I would like to table as well for councillors. Hi everyone, good morning. I will get started in the interest of time. I'm Nadine Malhop from Hospitality New Zealand. This is my colleague Kim Odendal. We are regional managers for the Auckland region. Thank you. Hospitality New Zealand is a not-for-profit industry association. We've got bars, cafes, restaurants, accommodation providers, entertainment venues. We are here to say that we do acknowledge that the council and government goal of being smoke-free by 2025, and we are committed to working with council on this particular issue because it is one that affects our members and their businesses. We do support the draft revised policy and in particular the implementation plan that have been recommended, and again I'm just going to reiterate that we are committed to working with council on this. What we do not support is an outright ban or bylaw for outdoor dining areas. And I think one of the significant things that council needs to, or a significant hurdle that council, in my view, is going to be hard to justify, is that if you do put a ban on your outdoor dining licences, you're going to affect 800 or round about 800 businesses. That's how many have a street trading licence at this time. However, when we look at the numbers that we have, and I do think there needs to be more work on this, there is around about, or just over 2,300 on-licence premises, and there's 400 club licence premises. And then I can't get numbers on how many businesses have outdoor dining areas but who aren't licensed for the sale and supply of alcohol, but there's hundreds, if not thousands more of that. So your decision, or a decision to put in a ban on outdoor dining areas will affect 800 businesses. That's it. Everybody else who's got outdoor smoking areas who are on their own private property will be able to continue to allow smoking in those areas. We obviously think that that is quite unfair. We think that that unjustly disadvantages only some businesses, and actually at the end of the day is not going to achieve the goal that you want, which is smoke-free across those environments. There's a whole lot of other stuff that we think is going to be problematic as well. Potentially, if you look at Auckland, if you ban smoking in this particular area because it happens to have a street trading area, people will literally be able to go next door, and in most cases, it will literally be next door and be able to smoke in those outdoor dining areas of those businesses who aren't covered by your street trading licences. We also would point out that in 2015, council increased the street trading licence fees quite significantly, and in some instances they tripled those fees. They're being phased in by 3 years. So now you'd be looking at disadvantaging 800 businesses which you've tripled the fees on, and you're going to restrict the activity in them even more. We really don't think that that's very business friendly. We don't think that's innovative, and we don't think that's very creative of council. We also, for those people who can't smoke in those areas, they can potentially walk out onto the street, smoke in that street. We don't have any control over what people do on the street. You guys do. We don't think that there is enough rubbish facilities, and so potentially you're going to increase litter. Potentially you're going to increase the exposure to children by having them smoking on the street if they can't smoke in outdoor dining areas. We have less children in outdoor dining areas than there are in parks and beaches and reserves, so we would like to see Auckland Council really focus their resources particularly on those areas where you do have, and you are the only organisation that has the control over those parks, playgrounds, sports fields, beaches. When we looked at, we also support the use of e-cigarettes as well. So what the information that we've seen is that a rise in e-cigarettes is meaning a rise in people quitting smoking, and we would support that. We're quite happy to see the government look to legalise that and make that easier for people to get to. And we also look at a lot of the stuff that some quite forward-thinking and progressive public health people or health experts are talking about, and we support that, and that doing the same thing is not going to get you different results. It's really easy for people to say, right, let's just do more, let's just ban it. If we put a ban on everything, we really don't think that that's the way to go at all, and we don't think that's going to achieve your goal, particularly when it only is going to affect, for outdoor dining areas, 800 businesses at most. What we do want to do is work with council on that. In order for us to be able to get businesses to look at and encourage people to have their outdoor dining areas smoke-free by 2025, we need to be business friendly, we need to look at encouraging them, we need to look at incentivising them. A ban is not going to do that. We need to work with them, we need to have more conversations with those businesses. They are the experts, they're the experts on their business, they're the experts on their customers. Let's get them, incentivise them, let's find those case studies for those businesses that are smoke-free and who are really proudly smoke-free, so that we can hold those up as being a great business example or a leading business case. Let's get people being proud of being smoke-free and proudly promoting that to the customers, rather than having to say, sorry, we've been banned by Auckland Council in this particular area, but you can go next door and smoke because there's no ban there. That's not going to achieve your goal, and it's not going to achieve your goal of having smoke-free outdoor dining areas either. We really think that there's much better ways to do this than just constantly being the big stick, constantly putting in bans, constantly looking to prosecute people and in particular businesses. The other thing that I would note as well is that in licensed premises, those, when they do get a street trading licence, they then have to get that licensed. Once they're licensed, it's considered to be a licensed premises. That then falls under the Smoke-Free Environments Act, meaning that if there is complaints on it, Ministry of Health can come and investigate that. They have to have a look at whether it's an open area or not. So we do already have some rules around that. That has to be clearly delineated and identified as apart from a footpath, for example, so it's quite clearly identified to that business and the responsibility of that business. So, got anything else you want to say? Yeah. We really, again, we are committed to working with council on this, and we really think there are better ways to do it. We think that there's much more consultation needed and innovative information or innovative ways that we could look at doing this by really involving those businesses, really talking to those businesses and getting them on board, getting them to buy into the concept rather than just a ban, as always.
Thank you. Thanks, Nadine. Questions? Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Hospitality New Zealand, a decade ago or more, I was vehemently opposed to the nation going smoke-free. You indicated at that time that 23% of New Zealand licensed premises would have to close. Did that happen? Did 23% have to close?
I don't have those exact numbers, but yes, we absolutely did get reports from businesses who did close because they couldn't have smoking inside, and they weren't at that time able to facilitate smoking outside either. People did get smart, obviously, though, and they did build some pretty amazing outdoor areas to offset some of the loss that they were seeing otherwise.
To my knowledge, 23% did not close. Are you aware that after the smoke-free legislation came in, that the food and beverage industry increased its profits steadily? You must have that data.
I don't agree that you can say that that's particularly because of smoke-free. I think you need to look at, when you look at a decade ago, or even longer than that, but around about a decade ago, what was considered to be a gourmet food offering in a tavern was essentially 3 different types of pies. Now you can go into a tavern and get an amazing meal on things. That innovation and that progression, which has got some of our bars and our restaurants being amongst the top in the world, didn't come from a ban on smoking. It came from people being innovative and wanting to lead the way and listening to what our customers wanted and moving with the times, and came from us or those operators actually being passionate about it and wanting to do better and wanting that edge to compete. So what I feel we need to do in this instance is get those case studies and find those people who are wanting to go smoke-free to compete and show everybody else that it is actually better for business. But that needs to come from the industry. It can't come from a ban on 800 outdoor
So
areas.
from the industry, Madam Chair, a trial was undertaken of your industry in Christchurch, and some 20 restaurants participated, and the results of that trial on going smoke-free al fresco were that 95% of customers supported the outcome, that direction. Are you aware of your members' success with their customers in that trial?
No, I haven't looked at that, and my understanding is it was cafes in particular, not necessarily all restaurants and bars as well. So I think that there's a differentiation in that. There was 18 places there as well. From what I've seen, they did say that it was successful. But again, in my opinion, therein lies my point. They specifically wanted to do it. They got on board with it. They bought into it. They encouraged it. They encouraged their staff in it. They were proud to be smoke-free. It was a trial that they bought into. That's what we need to do in Auckland, rather than it's a ban, you can't do it, only in those 800 places. That is not going to get us the achievement or the goal that we want at the end of the day.
And just one last, are you aware that the New Zealand Medical Association research indicates that the highest exposure to second-hand smoke is in the outdoor dining area?
No, and I'd like to see that research. I'd be interested to see that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Darby. Mayor Goff.
I think it's been substantially asked already by Councillor Darby, but I was going to ask along the same lines. I heard all of those same arguments when we brought in the initial smoke-free environment bill. I heard all of those same arguments when smoking was banned in restaurants. But if, as you say, Nadine, that you've got to listen to your customers, most of us as customers actually won't go to places where we're getting cigarette smoke blown around us. So isn't it slightly disingenuous to say we'll discourage customers when actually most customers do want to eat, drink, be entertained in smoke-free environments?
I would disagree with that. Our members are not telling us that. They are telling us that at the moment, their customers do want to have some areas where they can smoke in, and our members have told us that it would be a significant impact. And again, the fact that we're even having these questions and these conversations, in my view, means that we actually need to be going out and talking to these businesses rather than putting in a ban on them today, getting them again to buy into it and pointing out that stuff to them. Do a case study on it. Let's show them that. Let's go to our customers.
Yep. Isn't it true, though, that when you talk to people who are smokers, quite a few of them have said to you, as they would have said to me, that actually, while we hated it, it did help encourage us to kick the habit, and that's what we're trying to do.
Agreed, and there are people that think that. There are people that think that not smoking inside planes, for example, or inside restaurants is the best thing ever. But what I don't think you're taken into account is you looking at doing a ban here is only going to affect 800 businesses. What we actually want to do is get everybody thinking that, and the only way that we're going to do that is involving them and getting them leading the way in it. A ban affecting 800 businesses out of thousands is not the way to do it.
So what do we do by 2025 when we say we want to be smoke-free, but it hasn't happened because we never had the courage to take the steps that we needed to?
I disagree that you won't have the courage to take the steps that we're committed to working with council on it. We're committed to getting case studies. We've got an Auckland branch. We can look at what our members have done in Christchurch and in Wellington and get that together. I don't think that this is taking no steps at all. I think it is actually being innovative and business friendly, and actually is going to achieve more by getting more people to buy into it than just putting a ban on 800 premises.
Okay. We are starting to stray a little bit into, from policy through into the bylaw debate that I think is going to be a long one, and I do want to signal councillors I'm actually going to be moving a recommendation to just put a bit more time into this, so we don't need to address everything right now. I've got Councillor Casey and then Councillor Cashmore. We are running very short of time, councillors, and I will be the one in the firing line when you're not at your meetings at 4 o'clock this afternoon. We've got a lot of staff waiting to present, so keep it snappy. Councillor Casey.
You've been in the room for the last hour of presentations, so you've heard from the 5 health groups. They've each expressed their disappointment in us pushing out our actions on smoke-free. I presume then that you would not be disappointed at the recommendations that we're about to discuss under this item, where 7 of the actions involve the Hospitality Association working with the council towards Smoke-Free 2025. So you'd be pleased about that?
Yes, I am pleased about that, yes.
Thank you. Would you also agree that although smokers are your customers, people who die from cancer are also your customers?
Yes.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, Madam Chair. What percentage of your memberships, they've given the response that they thought this policy would hurt them, so have they given you the numbers of smokers who are using outdoor alfresco dining?
Not numbers, because again, we feel that there wasn't enough consultation on this in particular. We would like to see that, and we've committed to working with council to actually get that information. We did do a precursory survey of our members, and again, there's not numbers particularly, but 95% of those venues do allow smoking in their outdoor area. I can send you the results of this survey. Every single one of them, apart from one, said that, 11% said that they thought that a ban on smoking in outdoor areas would have a positive effect on their business. 5.5% said other. Don't know what that means. There was some people who said they're both positive and negative. And then 83.3% said that they felt it would have a negative effect on their business. And that's the attitude and that's the mindset that we need to change, and we need to work with those businesses to show them that actually it's going to have a positive effect. We know that there are, and there must be, some businesses who have decided to ban it, who are doing really well. We need to get those people and highlight them as being the best case scenario and one that people should be aiming for a variety of reasons, not just business reasons, but also to help with the goal of smoke-free by 2025, and because it is the healthiest thing to do for customers. But a ban on a small number of businesses is not going to achieve that.
Okay. And I think this is a discussion we will come back to. Right. I'd like to thank Nadine on behalf of the... sorry, I didn't have you down. Sorry, who is someone? Oh, Councillor Simpson, did you?
No, I was just indicating I'm happy to second your recommendation.
I've got a question. Hang on, we're not even there yet. Let's just deal with our presenters. Sorry, Councillor Simpson.
Just a quick question. Your 800 businesses that will be affected, are they in a particular, majority of them in a particular region, or are they very evenly spread?
So that's 800, not just of our members, that's 800. From the information that I have, that's 800 street trading licences that have been issued across the whole of Auckland. So of all the businesses across Auckland, there is 810 that have a street trading licence for outdoor dining.
Okay, fair enough. So thank you. Thanks for presenting on behalf of the Hospitality New Zealand.
Thank you.
And I will move that we thank our presenters. Councillor Darby's already signalled that he wishes to second that. So that includes all of our presenters on smoke-free. So I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We have a last presentation in the public input side of things, and we've got Audrey Van Ryan to speak on the homeless report.
Actually unwell, and I'm going to speak on her behalf, if I may.
Oh, okay.
Tam, can I give you a...
Thank you. Yes. We're used to seeing you in other
We are.
guises.
Civic trust, civic responsibility,
yes.
it's all
Yeah.
the same.
So again, just remembering 5 minutes and then time for questions.
Oh, is that?
It's pretty warm.
Right,
Got a few
phone in
slides
your
which we can
hands.
just put up as we go. Audrey has been just unable to present, so I'm going to read a statement from her, which I've also put on that memory stick along with some images for you. My name is Audrey Van Ryn. I live in Wellesley Street. Within 700 metres of my apartment, dozens of people sleep outdoors at night, with a friend also a central city dweller. I have been campaigning for a night shelter for about 2 years. We made submissions to the inquiry into homelessness, have written letters to the paper, presented the idea of the old Mount Eden prison to the Mayor, and supported the proposal last winter to open up the floor of the Civic Admin building to homeless people for 10 weeks. I support Council voting for option 4. This is in relation to item 12 today. I support Council voting for option 4 and to include within it the implementation of a night shelter. I do support the Housing First program, but as noted in the agenda for this meeting at page 134, currently homelessness is increasing faster than the growth of housing supply. This means that with the best intentions of getting people into housing, they will be spending days, weeks, months, years on the street or in inadequate shelter before they get a house. A recent Herald article, July 11th, stated that the City Mission is inundated by desperately needy people. A night shelter alongside the Housing First program is needed. Page 260 of the agenda refers to people without shelter and states that this is to be the most acute dimension of homelessness, which has the most immediate and significant effects on the person. This report recommends continued focus and activities to support this group. One would think, One would think that a night shelter would support this group of people. Yesterday I spoke with Sean, who has been sleeping under a bridge in Auckland Central for more than 20 years, and he said that I had hoped to speak about the need for night shelter at this meeting. He said that when he was in Sydney there were almost 30 night shelters, and you would phone on an 0800 number, type of number, and be given the address to one of them to go to. Night shelters in other cities in New Zealand can and do serve people who are without shelter. However, the report in the agenda tends to dismiss night shelters. On page 158, they're referred to as a form of emergency housing, but differ in that they provide a bed on a night-by-night basis. Do not operate during the daytime hours, and no obligation is placed on individuals to accept support to address their personal circumstances or move into long-term accommodation. We've got about another 20 lines. The Director of Dunedin Night Shelter sent us a description of how that facility came about and how it operates. In 2015, it housed 34 clients and also looks to identifying potential homeless people and supporting them before they become homeless. This shelter and others in New Zealand provide a bed at far less cost than the $100,000 a year we are spending to keep someone in prison. Page 181 of the agenda states that nationwide there is limited reporting on the use of night shelters and how often demand exceeds capacity. Internationally, night shelters have been found to be expensive to operate and not associated with long-term reductions in numbers of rough sleepers. We have contacted all the night shelters we know of in New Zealand and received precise details of their operations. Council could provide buildings on a temporary basis for both a night shelter and other emergency housing within its portfolio. Panuku Development could assist with recommendation B, a more detailed stocktake. Providing a currently empty council building removes a huge part of the expense. Other city councils have made their buildings available for night shelters, and the community has supported this both with money and as volunteers. For example, Manchester Council provided a former library and a former children's home. I was sent a comprehensive report about how this project was undertaken. There is widespread public concern about homelessness, and many people are likely to support a night shelter, both with money and by volunteering. The community fridge, which many homeless people now rely on, is run by volunteers, of which I am one, and it is a very successful project. I also believe the discussions about homelessness should include members of the homeless community so that they can be guided by the real needs and suitable solutions. The City Missioner stated at a talk a month ago that the life expectancy of a homeless person is 55 years. Auckland needs an emergency shelter as soon as possible in order to meet the basic human needs and provide other necessary support to the growing number of homeless members of the public. So that's what she prepared for you. And you can see examples of this. I think the thing started with Mayor Goff's good start in the Mayoralty on the homeless problem. And you can just scroll through to the end. And that document is in there. I guess what I've heard talking to Audrey is that there's a lot of initiatives in relation to longer term things, but it's really the immediate person who's sitting out in the rain, nowhere to put his or her bags. We could just leave it on that one at the end there. Thank you.
Okay. So this is something we'll canvass, I guess, in depth when we get to our item on homelessness. So if you could pass on our kind regards to Audrey.
I will.
And thank you for coming in and presenting on her behalf. I guess we can have a couple of very, very quick questions. Just while we go to Councillor Mike Lee, I've just done a quick little time workout, and I think we will be struggling to finish by 4, so if we can save the discussion for the homeless agenda. Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr Matson. Can you confirm that Auckland did have a night shelter like all the other major cities up until about 2012?
It did, in fact, and it was just around the corner from the Fitzroy Hotel. Yeah.
And can you confirm that most cities in New Zealand and Australia still have night shelters?
By reference to Audrey's discussion, yes, I'd say so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm happy to move that we thank Mr Matson for his presentation on behalf of Ms Van Ryan.
So I've left a copy of you to go with the minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now we've got local board input. I'm going to invite the local board members to